When the dispatch came in, we were told there was a stabbing on a Greyhound bus. That's not something you hear every day, but we thought maybe a fight had broken out. Maybe someone got cut. Nothing could have prepared us for what we were about to walk into. We pulled up and found the bus stopped on the side of the Highway 1. Passengers were scattered along the road, some vomiting, others frozen in shock. A few of them couldn't even speak. One woman just kept whispering, "He's cutting him, he's cutting him." I looked through the window, and there he was, the suspect, standing in the aisle, calm as ever, covered in blood, holding a human head. Just holding it. No emotion, no urgency, like it was normal. When we finally boarded the bus, I swear, I've never seen anything like it in my life. The body wasn't whole. It wasn't even human anymore. It looked like an animal had been butchered. And the man, he had a piece of flesh in his hand, like it was lunch. I've dealt with violent crimes before, but this wasn't violence. This was depravity. And the worst part is, he didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't run. He just looked at us, like we were the ones interrupting something sacred. Tim McLean wasn't a celebrity, nor was he someone the world had heard of, until tragedy struck. Born in 1985, he was an everyday guy, but carried an unmistakable energy and compassion for living life to the fullest. Tim had a contagious laugh, a heart open to everyone he met, and a passion for adventure. He thrived on movement, rarely staying in one place too long. That summer, he was working with the traveling carnival, helping set up rides and manage operations as he journeyed through Western Canada. For Tim, it wasn't just a job. It was a way to stay in motion, to live freely, and to connect with people from every walk of life. On July 30th, after finishing a long shift in Edmonton, Tim booked a ticket on Greyhound 1170 to return home to his family in Winnipeg. He was exhausted but happy. He took a seat near the back of the bus, popped in his earbuds, leaned against the window, and fell asleep to his music. For all intents and purposes, Tim was safe, surrounded by people, traveling home. But what he didn't know was that a monster just had boarded that same bus. At around 6:55 p.m., the bus made a brief stop in Erickson, a small rural town along the highway. Among the boarding passengers was 40-year-old Vince Lee, dressed plainly, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. He appeared calm, perhaps even polite. He spoke to no one. He quietly walked past several empty seats and eventually sat down at the front. After a few minutes, without a warning, he stood up, moved to the rear of the bus, and sat beside Tim McLean, who was still asleep with his headphones on. Lee didn't speak, didn't fidget, didn't act suspicious. In fact, other passengers later testified that he was unnervingly still, staring straight ahead, almost in a trance. No one imagined that tucked inside his bag was a large razor-sharp hunting knife. No one saw it coming. At approximately 8:30 p.m., the silence of the bus was shattered. Passengers were shaken by a scream. One woman turned to see Lee repeatedly plunging a knife into Tim McLean's neck and chest. The initial steps were rapid and unforgiving. Tim awoke in a panic, thrashing in terror, but he was cornered. Trapped between the window and his killer, his screams were muffled by the earbuds still in his ears. He tried to escape, but Lee kept stabbing 10, 20, 30 times. Panic erupted. Passengers began rushing to the front of the bus, screaming at the driver to stop. The driver pulled over on the side of the highway near Portage La Prairie. One brave passenger, a truck driver named Chris Alguire, attempted to intervene, but was forced back by the sheer brutality of what he saw. Once the bus was stopped and emptied, only two people remained inside: Tim McLean's lifeless body and Vince Lee, who was just getting started. As horrified passengers and police stood outside, Lee continued his unspeakable work. Using his knife, he decapitated Tim, then slowly walked to the front of the bus holding the severe head by the hair, as if to present it. He then calmly placed it on the dashboard of the bus. But it wasn't over. Lee returned to the corpse and began carving pieces of flesh from the body, including Tim's ears, tongue, and portion of his face and chest. Witnesses, including officers, later reported that Lee was seen eating parts of the body, chewing methodically, without emotion. He placed the body parts into a plastic grocery bag, which he stuffed into his pocket like snacks. Then he sat down, quietly, holding the bags covered in blood. The passengers, many of whom were traumatized beyond words, watched helplessly. Some wept, others vomited. Police surrounded the bus but hesitated to storm in, unsure what they were even dealing with. A hostage situation, a terrorist, a madman. In reality, it was all three. The standoff lasted nearly 5 hours. During that time, Lee remained eerily composed. At one point, he attempted to drive the bus away, but was stopped by a disabled engine. Officers used surveillance to observe his behavior. He was pacing, talking to himself, licking blood off his fingers. The horror didn't stop even in solitude. Finally, at 1:28 a.m., police made their move. Armed officers broke through the window with flash grenades and tasers, managing to subdue Lee after a brief struggle. He was arrested on the spot. When investigators boarded the bus, the interior was described as a slaughterhouse. Blood was smeared across the seats, the walls, the windows. Tim's dismembered body lay across the floor. Bags of flesh were scattered around the killer. The scene was so disturbing that several police officers required trauma counseling afterwards. The public wanted swift justice, but what they got instead was controversy. Vince Lee was quickly assessed by psychiatrists, who diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. According to court documents, he believed that God was speaking directly to him, warning him that Tim McLean was a demon, sent to destroy the world. In his mind, killing and consuming Tim was a divine act of salvation. In 2009, Lee was found not criminally responsible due to mental illness. He was sent to the Selkirk Mental Health Center, not prison. He expressed no remorse, only that he understood why people were upset. His flat, emotionless demeanor was deeply unsettling. The victim's family, especially his mother, was shattered. She began campaigning for changes to Canadian law, demanding that those who commit violent crimes while mentally ill face consequences. But the system did not budge. In the move that stunned the public, Vince Lee was gradually given more freedom. In 2015, he was granted supervised outings. In 2016, unsupervised excursions. By 2017, he was released entirely. He legally changed his name to Will Baker and was declared a low risk to public safety. Today, Vince Lee, the man who decapitated, dismembered, and ate another human being, walks free. He has a new identity, privacy rights, and no criminal record. Meanwhile, the McLean family continues to mourn a son they will never see again, and the people who witnessed that night will never unsee it. It's easy to believe that monsters hide in the shadows. But what if the real horror sits quietly beside you on the bus? What if evil isn't loud, but patient, polite, and ready to strike without warning? The death of Tim McLean wasn't a tragedy. It was a glimpse into how thin the line is between civilization and chaos. A line that shattered on a quiet bus in the middle of nowhere. Tim McLean didn't die alone. He died while others watched, helpless. He died in terror, and he died in vain, because his killer was never punished, never held accountable, never made to face the weight of his actions. Some say justice was served. Others say the law failed. But one truth remains. The man who tore Tim apart is free, and Tim is not. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay cautious. Until next time on Reaper Files.